Today, we have 4 ghost stories taken from Reddit, with an additional story thrown in as a bonus. Before we start, please like and subscribe to this channel for a feast of grim and grisly content. I am your host, Severed Soul. Hearing Your Own Voice by Reddit user Anonymous. This happened to me just a few minutes ago. I'm sitting home alone with my cat in my living room. I heard someone say my boyfriend's name from the hallway just outside my front door. I didn't really think anything of it at first, until it happened for a second time. And then it clicked. Holy shit, that's my voice. My cat quickly turned her head to face the door where the voice was coming from, and that's when I heard it for a third time. After the third time, I walked to my door to take a look through the peephole. My cat got up with me, but seemed unconcerned, and went to her food bowl. There was no one in my hallway, but as soon as I put my eye up to the peephole, the doorknob started to turn. After I saw the doorknob start to turn, I picked up my cat and ran to the bathroom, where we hid for about 10 minutes. This was the only time my cat seemed scared, and I think it was my reaction that scared her, not the actual events that transpired. I called my mum, my dad, and my boyfriend, but got no answer. So then I called my grandma, who told me that she had also experienced something very similar in the past. Just the voice, not the physical experience, and she told me that it could be a mimic. It's not really a term I'm too familiar with, and I couldn't find too much relevant information online. She recited the Lord's Prayer with me, and told me that mimics aren't usually malevolent in nature, and that it was probably just a scare tactic. She also told me never to respond, as they can feed off any energy that you direct towards them. I live in a multi-storey complex, with apartments across the hallway from me, and on the opposite side of my far left wall. I do have schizoaffective disorder, but I'm certain this wasn't a hallucination, as my cat also reacted by looking towards the door when I heard the voice. My boyfriend called me back and suggested that it's probably just my stress manifesting itself through hallucinations. My hallucinations have never been like this. I might see something and then it's gone, or I'll hear whispers that I can't discern. It really hurt that he suggested that I was just hallucinating, and I just kept telling him I'm not crazy. I don't know if that was just his way of trying to comfort me, but it did hurt that he didn't believe me. The voice sounded like me, but just ever so slightly wrong, like it lacked a human cadence. The only way I can think to describe it is like Uncanny Valley, only this was auditory and not visual. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this? Ghost experience in hotel turned me into a believer. By Reddit user Hopeful Pay 9339. So, this is an experience I had in 2018. I was a management trainee with an organisation, and my training consisted of a short 1 or 2 week stint across their major offices in different cities. Our employers organised the accommodation for us too. For my second stint, I was put in a city where I'd never been before, so I had no friends or acquaintances. So the company booked a hotel close to the office premises. The room was rather big and seemed quite luxurious, albeit a bit old and somewhat dated. What stumped me the most was how economical it was. The first night was uneventful, and for a woman travelling alone for the first time, it felt secure and comfortable. On the second night, at about 9:30 p.m, I ordered food in, and after finishing my dinner, I went out of my door to place the food trolley for collection by the staff. Then, just as I turned around to close my door, I could see someone staring at me from out of the corner of my eye. The person was standing at the end of the corridor where it was very dimly lit. Let me add here that only 2 out of the 20 rooms on that floor were occupied, and 10 were currently being renovated. hence the dim lighting at night. When I turned to look, the person ran out of view towards the elevator. I was creeped out, so I locked the door and reported the incident to reception. On the third night, I was talking to my mum on a video call when I could hear heavy pacing and running coming from out in the corridor. It was about 10 or 10:30 p.m. and my mum heard it too. I sneaked up to the peephole, but I could see no one, yet I could hear the footsteps from right outside my door. I called down to reception and they sent somebody up to check. They reported that there was nobody around and they checked their CCTV footage and nobody was there. And the fourth night, things started to get really creepy. I received a call on the phone inside the hotel room, but when I answered, all I could hear was heavy breathing and a low growling noise. This occurred another 2 times before I called reception to raise a complaint. They checked their call panel records and said that I hadn't received any calls from other hotel guests or staff lines. The next morning, I asked them to check again. They showed me that the system is automated and nobody could tamper with it. The system did show no incoming or outgoing calls from my room. The 5th night was hell. I could hear a constant knocking on the wall behind the bed, and it moved around the room. It moved to wherever I was standing. This absolutely terrified me. As someone diagnosed with hyperanxiety and depression, it felt like I was losing my mind, and I could feel an anxiety attack building. I sprinted out of my room and down to reception, which was 2 floors below. The manager on duty tried to calm me down as I was extremely upset. I questioned everyone around, and none of the staff reported ever encountering anything like this before at the hotel. They said it was strange that these things were happening, but they agreed to assign me to a room elsewhere in the hotel. Later on, a woman from my hometown who currently worked at the hotel accompanied me to my new room. She told me, in private, that the floor I was on had been unoccupied for 5 years and had only recently been reopened for guests. Rumour has it that some old hotel staff member had attacked a woman up there and she lost her life in the struggle. As it turns out, previous hotel owners covered up what had happened and paid off the victim's family. And eventually they went on to sell this property to the current owners. Since then, numerous guests have reported multiple occurrences on that floor. These were major experiences, but some other small things happened as well, like the feeling of being watched, drops in temperature, and feelings of nausea and panic. I checked out of that hotel promptly the next morning and found another hotel to stay at, which I paid for out of my own pocket. Since then, I've been extremely scared and anxious whenever I've been alone in a hotel room. Bathroom Ghost Experience by Kale43. Okay, this is my story. At one of my jobs, during my first day, I had to wait with some of my new co-workers for my mum to finish her shift. She'd got me a job at the restaurant she worked at, as I was new to the area. She'd been there for a little over a year, and we'd decided to carpool together. Anyway, my trainer and other co-workers and I were closing the restaurant side of the building for the night. The other side, which was connected by a hallway and 2 doorways, was a bar area, and this was still open for another 2 hours. After we finished closing up, I was sitting in the darkened restaurant at a table with 2 co-workers, just chatting and trying to get to know each other a bit. I excused myself to use the restroom, which is in the hallway which connects the bar and restaurant. That hallway and the bathroom are both pretty close to the front door. The bathroom door was super heavy and opened with a very loud creaking sound. It closed really slowly because it had one of those anti-slam spring mechanisms installed. It was also a great noise barrier, so when someone opened the door when you were inside the bathroom, any noise from the bar area would be much louder until the door finally closed again. The bathroom light was activated by a motion detector. so the light was switched off until I opened the door and walked in. To paint a picture, as you walk in, on the left closest to the door is the sink. A bit further into the bathroom on the left are 3 stalls. The 2 first stalls are quite small, the last one's a bit bigger to be used by families or disabled users. I know I was alone in there, as the 3 stall doors were open, and I have a habit of looking underneath for people's legs. So, I decided to enter the first stall, and just as I finished peeing, the lights turned off by themselves. I was completely startled by this, and remember saying "what the fuck" under my breath. And right as I'm about to stand up and flush, in the now pitch black bathroom, there's 4 or 5 loud bangs on my stall door. The bangs were so hard the whole stall shook. It scared the absolute shit out of me, so this time I yelled "what the fuck, not funny." I was kind of expecting to hear laughter or giggling or something, presuming that one of my new co-workers was playing a prank on me. But there was nothing, just a few seconds of complete silence, and then the lights popped back on again. I didn't hear the door open or close, and I didn't hear any footsteps. There was literally nothing until that banging started. I was absolutely petrified and got out of that stall as quickly as I could. Out of sheer curiosity, I had a quick glance in each of the other 2 stalls, which, of course, were completely empty. I didn't see anyone, and I'm absolutely certain that I would have heard the door open and close if anybody had come in after me. And, as I already said, I already checked to see if anyone was in there before I entered the first stall. I also wasn't in there for more than just a few minutes, seriously, probably 3 minutes tops. I washed my hands as quickly as possible, and desperately tried to rationalise what had just happened. When I got back to where my co-workers were sitting, I find only my male co-worker sitting there. I smiled, amused, thinking, it must have been my female co-worker, and she's about to jump out at me any second, to try to scare me again. I asked the guy where she'd gone, and he said that she'd already left out the back exit, which is at the opposite end of the corridor to the bathroom. He said she had to leave because it was late, and she was opening up early the next morning, and she said to say goodbye. I sat down, both confused and scared. I didn't mention this to anyone until about a month or so in. I heard another co-worker talking to a customer about weird experiences she'd had at the restaurant, and that she thought that it might be haunted. Apparently, somebody had killed themselves in the basement in the 40s, when it was just a small shop. Over the 9 months of me working there, numerous things happened, not only to me, but to my other co-workers as well. There is a chance it could have been those guys pranking me, but nobody ever owned up to it. It would be virtually impossible to enter that bathroom without being heard, and I do think it's a bit weird if it was a prank. The Italian lady that haunted our old house. By Reddit user, South Africa 5944. When I was around 7 years old, me and my mum moved to Australia from South Africa. We moved into this cute, small cottage in a popular neighbourhood. The house was old, and a few areas were showing signs of wear and tear. I would never go alone into the living room, because it always terrified me. There was always some creepy, ominous feeling in that room. After a few months of living in that house, I started to wake up in the middle of the night, hearing loud, horrible noises coming from downstairs in the kitchen. It sounded like pots and pans being slammed together and being thrown all over the kitchen. Apprehensively, one night I walked into the kitchen, and to my surprise there was nothing there. Nothing was out of place. So I shrugged it off and went back to bed. However, this started to happen more frequently on an almost daily basis. One day, me and my mum were having a discussion about the noises when she said something that sent chills down my spine. Can you see her too? Those were the exact words my mum said to me. She told me she could see an old Italian-looking lady crashing pots and pans together in the kitchen, looking furious, yelling at her to get out of her house. A month later, still hearing those sounds at night, me and my mum were meeting a neighbour at a local coffee shop. My mum asked the neighbour if by any chance an old Italian lady had ever lived in our house. The neighbour then said, "How do you know? She died in that house just before you moved in." We were petrified. That night, my mum saw the lady again, only this time she seemed angrier than ever. The next morning, my mum told me that she'd tried to communicate with the lady. She said she tried to reassure her that we meant no harm and that we would take good care of the house. This was the last encounter we had with the lady, and that living room no longer had that creepy, ominous feeling. To this day, I still don't entirely understand why it was happening. Reddit user Taunton Lake commented, "I had this phenomenon happen once, when I was living in a rented apartment for about 6 months. I'd found a nice looking pen in a huge bag of hoarded pens. The bag was shut away in a closet, and I just assumed that the previous tenant had left it there. So I took the pen up to my room upstairs to write some stuff down in a notebook. I was completely alone in the apartment at the time. About half an hour after taking the pen, I could hear the most god-awful racket coming from downstairs. It sounded like it was in the kitchen. That whole cacophony of pots and pans being thrown around the room. It went on for about 10 minutes, and it was so bad there was no way in hell I was going downstairs to see what it was. After a while, it slowed down and stopped, but I still stayed where I was for another 15 minutes. Finally, I got brave enough to emerge and go downstairs. Nothing. Not a thing out of place. I returned the pen to the bag anyway. I think I really pissed someone off by taking it. It was easily the wildest, most unexplainable thing that's ever happened to me. It totally changed my perspective, that reality might not be all that black and white. That wraps things up for today. Please, as always, leave your thoughts in the comments section. Like this video and subscribe to this channel for a feast of grim and grisly content. I'm your host, Severed Soul.